You think your mind is in your head, behind your eyes, inside your skull, somewhere in the dark, folded matter of your brain. That's the picture you carry, quietly, constantly. You imagine your thoughts sealed inside you, private, contained, local. But this picture is wrong, not slightly wrong, fundamentally wrong, because the moment you see a tree, where is that tree? In the world or in your mind? And if the tree you experience exists inside your awareness, then where does your awareness end? At your skin? At your eyes? At the object itself? You don't know. You've never checked. You assume the boundary between you and the world is obvious. Brain in here, reality out there. But physics does not respect this boundary, and neither did Feynman. When you follow the logic carefully, something unsettling happens. The place you thought your mind lived begins to dissolve. Inside, outside, observer, observed. The distinctions stop behaving, and the question becomes unavoidable. If your experience of the world happens where the world appears, then where does your mind actually exist? You are certain your experience happens inside your head. You've never seen it. You've never felt the location of a thought. But you are certain. You point to your skull and say, my mind is in here. This feels obvious, almost trivial. But notice something strange. You have never experienced your brain directly. You have seen images of brains, diagrams, scans, illustrations in textbooks. But those are things you see, appearances in your experience, just like anything else. Your actual experience is not a brain in darkness. Your experience is color, sound, sensation, space, texture, memory. Your experience is the world. Right now you see a screen. You hear sounds around you. You feel the pressure of your body against a chair. None of this feels like it is happening inside a skull. It feels spread out, external, extended in space. The room appears around you. The world does not feel compressed into a small volume behind your eyes. So where did the idea come from? You were told that the brain produces experience. You learned that neurons fire, signals travel, and somehow a world appears. But notice the quiet leap in logic. From the brain is involved, you concluded experience is located inside the brain. Those are not the same claim. A radio depends on internal circuits, but the music it plays is not experienced as happening inside the wires. The sound fills the room. Yet with the mind, you assume the opposite. You assume that because the brain is necessary, experience must be physically contained within it. But pause. When you look at a mountain, where is the mountain you see? Not the physical object of geology, the one you experience. It appears far away, vast, external. It does not appear as a tiny electrical event in your head. Your lived world has size, distance, direction. It surrounds you. If your experience were literally inside your skull, your entire universe would feel smaller than a grapefruit. But it doesn't. Your experienced world is enormous. Already the picture begins to wobble. You might respond, of course the brain constructs an illusion of space. But then a deeper question emerges. Where does this constructed space exist? If your brain creates a world that appears outside you, then your experience contains both your body and the world around it. Your own head appears within the space you perceive. So which contains which? Does the brain contain the experience, or does experience contain the brain you perceive? You cannot easily answer, because everything you know about your brain, its shape, its location, its existence, arrives as experience. The brain you believe houses your mind is itself something that appears in your mind. This is the strange loop you rarely notice. You imagine a physical object inside experience that supposedly produces experience itself, a container that appears within what it contains, and you accept this without discomfort. But once you slow down, the certainty fades. The idea that your mind sits neatly inside your head is not something you discovered. It is something you assumed. And the moment you question that assumption, the boundary between you and the world begins to feel less solid, less obvious, less real. You believe you see with your eyes. Light enters, signals travel, images form in the brain. This is the story. And because the process ends in the brain, you assume the experience must be there too. But this is where intuition quietly misleads you. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine a red apple. The apple appears somewhere. It has shape, color, location. Where is it? You do not experience the apple as hidden in neural tissue. You experience it in a kind of space, a mental space with depth and position. Now open your eyes and look at something in front of you. A wall, a hand, a screen. Notice the difference. The imagined object feels internal, vague, floating. The seen object feels external, stable, located in the world. Yet according to the standard picture, both experiences are patterns of activity in the same brain, the same tissue, the same skull. So why do they appear in completely different places? Why does one feel inside while the other feels out there? The usual answer says the brain constructs a representation of an external world. But again, this avoids the real question. Where does this representation appear? Not physically, experientially. When you see a tree, your experience places it meters away from you. It occupies space beyond your body. You do not experience a private image inside your head that you interpret as a tree. You experience the tree itself, standing there. Your perception does not feel like an internal picture. It feels like direct contact with the world. This creates a strange tension. Physics tells you light reflects from objects, enters the eye, triggers neural signals. The causal chain moves inward, but your experience moves outward. The process points one direction. Your awareness points the other. Somewhere between these two descriptions, something slips. Consider a simple question. At what exact point does the external world become an internal experience? Is it at the retina, in the optic nerve, in the visual cortex? You can name physical stages. You can describe electrical changes. But nowhere in this chain do you find a moment where outside suddenly becomes inside. There is only interaction, transformation, exchange, and the question becomes unavoidable. If your experience of the world happens where the world appears, then where does your mind actually exist? No clear boundary. And yet your intuition insists the boundary must exist. You imagine a line where reality ends and mind begins, a border where the world stops and experience starts, but careful observation never reveals this border. There is only a continuous process, world affecting body, body affecting world. The location of experience never appears in the description. This is the discomfort you begin to face. The science of vision explains how information flows. It does not explain where seeing happens. And if you cannot point to where seeing occurs, you cannot confidently say where your mind is. The simple act of looking has already destabilized the idea that experience lives inside your head. The boundary you trusted remains unseen, unlocated, uncertain. Physicists are supposed to describe reality clearly. Objects, forces, particles, interactions, precise definitions, clean boundaries. But when physicists describe observation itself, the clarity dissolves. Richard Feynman noticed this, not as a mystical claim, not as philosophy, as a simple consequence of physics. He asked a disturbing question. When you see something, what exactly is happening? The usual explanation sounds straightforward. Light reflects from an object. It travels to your eye. It interacts with atoms in your retina. Electrical signals move through your brain. A chain of physical events, each step described as interactions between parts of the world. But notice what this description never includes. It never includes experience. Physics describes photons striking molecules. It describes electrical changes in neurons. It describes measurable processes. But nowhere does it describe the moment a world appears. And more importantly, it never identifies where the observer exists within the system. From the perspective of physics, your eye is just another object. Your brain is just more matter. Your body is part of the same physical network as the things you observe. There is no privileged location called the place where experience happens, only interacting systems. This creates a quiet but devastating problem. If everything, your brain, your body, the light, the object, belongs to the same physical description, where do you place the boundary between observer and observed? Where does the world end and the mind begin? Physics does not say. It cannot say. Because every attempt to draw a line simply creates two interacting physical systems, each describable in the same language. Feynman pointed out how strange this becomes. When you look at a star, you might imagine a clear separation. The star is out there. You are in here. But physics describes a continuous chain. The star emits light. The light interacts with your eye. Your eye interacts with your brain. At no point does the description introduce a separate domain called mind. There is only interaction, only process, only relationship. The observer does not sit outside the system. The observer is part of it. But if the observer is just another physical process, something unsettling follows. Who or what is having the experience? Where is the point of view located within this network of interactions? You might try to place it in the brain, but the brain itself is described as interacting atoms, processes within processes. No special place where experience is labeled, no marker that says the mind is here. This is not a failure of technology, it is a feature of the theory. Physics describes structure and behavior. It describes how things affect each other. It does not describe how it feels to be any part of that structure. And because of this, the location of experience disappears from the physical picture. The boundary you assumed, observer here, world there, never appears in the equations. It exists only in intuition. Feynman was deeply aware of this gap. He did not claim to solve it. He emphasized the mystery. The world of physics gives you extraordinary predictive power. It tells you how light moves, how brains function, how matter behaves. But when you ask where the experiencing subject exists within that world, the description falls silent. The observer becomes impossible to locate, not hidden, not tiny, unspecified. And if physics cannot tell you where the observer is, then the idea that your mind clearly lives inside your head begins to look less like a scientific fact and more like a habit of thought. You assume the world simply has properties. Objects have color. Events produce sound. The world carries qualities, and you detect them. This feels obvious. A rose is red. Fire is hot. Thunder is loud. But physics tells a very different story. Take color. What exists outside you, according to physics, is not redness. There are only electromagnetic waves, oscillations with different wavelengths. No redness in the wave. No greenness in the leaf, no blueness in the sky, just numbers, frequencies, motion. Somewhere in the interaction between these waves and your nervous system, color appears. But where? Not in the object. The wavelength itself is not red, not in the light. The photon carries no color, and not obviously in the brain either, because when you experience red, it does not appear as an event inside neural tissue. It appears as a property of the world. The red is out there on the surface of the object. So where does color exist? It is not in the world as physics describes it. It is not in the brain as you experience it. It exists in the relationship, neither inside nor outside. Something similar happens with sound. In the physical world, there are pressure waves, vibrations moving through air. No sound in the vibration itself. No noise in the moving molecules. Only motion. Yet you experience music, voices, thunder. And again, the experience is not located in your brain. The sound of a passing car appears to move down the street. A voice seems to come from across the room. Your experience places sound in the world, but physics places only vibration there. So where is the sound you hear? Not in the air, not in the neurons, not clearly anywhere, only in the interaction. Now the problem deepens. Your entire experienced world is built from qualities like this: color, sound, texture, temperature, smell, taste. None of these exist in physical descriptions of matter. Physics speaks only of fields, particles, forces, and interactions. The rich world you experience, the vivid world of qualities, has no clear location in that description. It is not contained in objects. It is not observable in the brain, and yet it is all you ever know. This forces a disturbing realization. What you call the world, the colorful, sounding, textured reality you live in, is not simply the physical world described by science. It is something that emerges between you and whatever exists independently of you, a shared event, a relational phenomenon. But if experience exists in relationships rather than locations, then the question, where is the mind, begins to lose meaning. Location applies to objects. Relationships are not objects. They have no coordinates, no boundaries. Color is nowhere in particular. Sound is nowhere in particular. And the mind, which is made entirely of such experiences, may not occupy a place at all. The world you perceive is not contained inside you, but neither is it simply outside you. The distinction begins to blur. You trust the brain. It feels like the solid answer, the physical anchor, Cut open the skull, and there it is. Gray matter, electrical activity, measurable structure. Surely this is where the mind lives. Neuroscience seems decisive. Stimulate a region of the brain, and a person reports a sensation. Damage an area, and a capacity disappears. Change the chemistry, and experience changes. The conclusion feels unavoidable. The brain produces the mind. The mind is inside the brain. But notice something subtle. Everything you know about the brain comes through experience. You see brain scans, you read measurements, you observe experiments. The brain you believe contains your mind is itself something that appears within your awareness. It is part of the world you experience. You never step outside experience to inspect the brain directly. You never access a raw physical reality beyond perception. The brain is known the same way everything else is known, as an appearance in your field of experience. This creates a strange reversal. You say the brain generates experience, but your knowledge of the brain exists within experience. Which comes first? You might respond, the brain exists objectively, whether or not you perceive it, perhaps. But notice what this claim does. It introduces a theoretical object, an unseen physical brain, inferred from patterns in experience, a model, a description. Science constructs this model because it predicts observations and explains behavior. It is extraordinarily successful, but success does not automatically answer the question of location. A map can describe a territory without containing it. A model can explain a process without being the place where the process occurs. Neuroscience describes correlations between brain states and experience. It shows reliable relationships, but correlation is not location. When activity appears in a brain scan alongside a reported sensation, we learn that certain physical processes and certain experiences occur together. We do not discover where the experience exists. We discover a relationship. This distinction is easy to overlook because the language of science encourages a container metaphor. Signals are processed, information is stored, representations are formed. These words suggest a physical space where experience resides, but they are metaphors, useful, powerful, predictive metaphors. They describe function, not lived reality. No one has ever opened a brain and found a color. No one has located the taste of sweetness in a neuron. No one has measured the precise spatial coordinates of a thought. There are only electrical patterns and chemical exchanges, processes described from the outside. The inner quality, the experience itself, never appears. So the brain becomes something unexpected, not a container of experience, but a structure within the world as you experience it. A structure whose changes correspond to changes in experience, a participant in a relationship. This does not deny the importance of the brain. It reframes its role. The brain may be necessary for your experience of the world, but necessity does not imply containment. A window is necessary for a view, but the landscape is not inside the glass. The moment you see this distinction, the certainty returns to uncertainty. If the brain is part of the world you experience, and experience cannot be located inside that world in any clear way, then the place you thought housed your mind loses its status as a container. The brain explains patterns. It predicts behavior. It correlates with experience, but it does not reveal where experience exists. And without a clear location for experience, the boundary between mind and world continues to erode. You live by a simple distinction. There is an inner world, and there is an outer world. Thoughts are inside. Objects are outside. The boundary is your body. This feels like the most basic fact of existence, but everything we've seen quietly erodes this boundary. Your experience of the world does not appear inside your head. Qualities like color and sound exist neither in objects nor in brains. Physics describes interactions without identifying an observer. Even the brain itself appears within experience. So where exactly is the dividing line? Try to find it. You might point to your skin. This seems obvious, a physical boundary separating you from the world, but your skin, like everything else, is something you perceive. Its texture, its shape, its location are experiences. Your sense of bodily boundary exists within awareness, not outside it. You do not step outside experience to verify the edge of yourself. The boundary is part of what appears. Now consider bodily sensation. A pain in your hand feels located in the hand. A sound feels located in the room. A thought feels less clearly located at all. Different experiences place themselves in different regions of space. But this space The space in which your body and the world appear is itself part of experience. Your body appears inside the same field as the objects around it. This creates a quiet reversal. You imagine that experience happens inside your body, but your body itself happens inside experience. The container becomes the contained. This is not a trick of language. It is the structure of how the world appears to you. Everything you know, your body, the room, distant stars, appears within a single unified field of awareness. There is no visible seam where experience stops and reality continues independently. No observable border where inside becomes outside. There is only one continuous presentation. You might insist that the external world exists beyond experience. Perhaps it does. Physics strongly suggests an independent reality, a world that does not depend on your observation. But even if such a world exists, you never encounter it directly. You encounter only its appearance. And appearances do not carry labels saying internal or external. Those distinctions are interpretations. From the standpoint of lived experience, everything simply appears. Body and world, self and environment, all within the same field. This destabilizes the idea of separation. The observer and the observed are not two clearly divided regions. They are aspects of a single process, a continuous interaction without a sharp boundary. Your experience of seeing a tree is not something happening purely inside you, nor is it something happening purely in the tree. It is an event that spans what you call self and what you call world, a relation without a precise location. And when relations replace locations, the question of where the mind exists becomes increasingly difficult to ask. Inside and outside are spatial concepts. They apply to objects with boundaries. But if experience is not an object, not a thing occupying space, then the language of location may not apply at all. The categories you rely on begin to fail, not because reality is vague, but because your intuitions about separation were too simple. The world and the mind do not sit on opposite sides of a border. The border itself may never have existed. You began with a simple question: where does your mind exist? Inside the brain, behind the eyes, somewhere in the head. That answer once felt certain, but every step of our inquiry has taken something away. You cannot locate experience in the brain because the brain itself appears within experience. You cannot place experience in the external world because physics describes only structures and interactions, never the qualities you actually perceive. You cannot draw a boundary between observer and observed because no such boundary appears in physical description or lived awareness. So the question changes, not where is the mind, but what kind of thing would have a location at all. Physics describes objects. Objects have positions, coordinates, boundaries. An electron has a location, a star has a location, a neuron has a location. But experience is not described this way. You cannot assign coordinates to the redness of red. You cannot measure the distance to a feeling. You cannot map the spatial position of awareness itself. Experience does not behave like an object among objects. And physics, by its nature, studies objects and their relations. It measures what can be located. It describes what can be distinguished. It predicts how structures evolve. It does not describe why there is something it is like to observe those structures. This is not a temporary gap in knowledge. It may be a limit of the method. Physics can tell you how matter behaves with extraordinary precision. It can explain the birth of stars, the structure of atoms, the activity of the brain. But when you ask where the experiencing subject exists within this description, the framework offers no answer. Not because the answer is hidden, because the question may not belong to the language of physics. Location is a concept within the world physics describes. Experience is the condition under which any world is described at all. One does not easily fit inside the other. This leaves you in an unfamiliar position. The mind is not clearly inside the body, not clearly outside it, not clearly anywhere, and yet it is the one thing you cannot doubt. Every theory, every measurement, every physical law appears within it. The entire universe you know, galaxies, particles, space, time, exists for you only as experience. The mind is not a small thing contained within reality. Reality, as you encounter it, is contained within the field of mind. This does not mean the external world is an illusion. It does not deny the existence of matter. It reveals something stranger. The relationship between mind and world is deeper than containment, deeper than location. Physics shows a universe of interacting structures. Experience reveals a universe that appears. How these two descriptions meet, where the appearing of the world fits within the structure of the world, remains unknown. And perhaps this is what unsettled thinkers like Richard Feynman most deeply. The more precisely we describe the machinery of reality, the more mysterious the presence of experience becomes. Not smaller, more fundamental. You search for the place where your mind exists, but the search assumes that mind is a thing among things, an object with a position. What if that assumption is wrong? What if the mind is not somewhere in reality, but the condition under which the idea of somewhere appears at all? The question does not close. It expands, and the world you thought you inhabited quietly transforms into something far more unfamiliar. A universe where the observer cannot be cleanly separated from the observed, where the location of experience cannot be drawn on any map, where the boundary between self and reality remains permanently unresolved. You wanted to know where your mind exists. Physics answers with silence. And in that silence, the question becomes deeper than location, deeper than matter, deeper perhaps than the universe itself.